Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the At the Water's Edge podcast, where we look for insights beyond the headlines to take a practitioner's view on national security and geopolitics. It's the 19th of July, 2025. Let's get started. Now, I had a buddy back in high school who wrote in his yearbook, "Knowledge is power. Power corrupts. Study hard. Be evil." We didn't really know what he was talking about at the time, but I do believe that's a summary of the current business model of Palantir. Fun little startup company, earning a lot of big contracts with the government these days. But we've seen a revolution in how AI has affected our ability to access, manage, and assess information used to make critical decisions. And how this is going to be used inside the Department of Defense, both at home and abroad in tactical situations, is an ongoing topic of conversation in the public and private sectors. No one's really got an answer to it yet, but it's something we're going to have to figure out. Now, our guest today, Jake Dyal, CEO of a company called Certus, where they use AI to help manage information for government clients with unique use cases. Jake's a cool guy. He's got a fun background in intelligence, working with special operations, then went into government service, actually kickstarted his own program inside the government, which is no small feat, then left the government because he was so frustrated with it and started his own company to try to solve the same problem that he was solving in government, but now in the private sector and selling it back to the government. It's an interesting story arc, and it touches on a lot of things, not only with the future of AI and how that impacts our national security strategy, but also how does new technology get integrated into the Department of Defense? How does the contracting process either support or hinder innovation? And why is it that someone who is in the government working on this problem find it more effective to actually leave government, go to the private sector, and try to sell the same capabilities and same problem sets he was working on back to the government? It's a story that I've heard from a lot of people and really interested to get into it with Jake. With that, let's get to Jake Dyal, CEO and founder of Certus. Well, Jake, good morning and welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing all right, Scott. Doing all right. Thanks for having me on.
Excited to have the conversation. So can you introduce yourself in your own words to the audience? Where do you work? What's your company? What's your background?
Yeah, so my name is Jake Dyal. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Certus. We're an AI company. What we do is data integration. We're a software platform you can integrate data on and then chat with it. We support primarily national security customers. My background, I was in the Army 13 years. Then I was a government program manager for 10 years in the intelligence community. And during that time, discovered the problem that we're solving now and actually worked on it quite a bit, stood up a program office trying to fix it, but then realized it was a technology problem and there was a technology to fix it. So me and my co-founders started the company we got now. So
nice. Yeah. And what problem exactly did y'all discover?
We discovered really that everybody wants their own custom data product, especially in the government. There's a new mission for every organization, every unit, and they all have their specific data that they want to integrate for that new mission. And that value of what is important, what data is the right data, really is in the eye of the beholder. So we realized that commercial industry wasn't out there solving this problem because they largely don't have it, because they can just collect whatever they want. They can put out a form, they can buy a lot of data from other people. But industry and specifically intelligence communities had this problem the entire time I've been in it. So the majority of my life. So we realized that we had to build technology to try to solve it.
And what data are we talking about here? Are these drone feeds, names, phone numbers? What is the actual data here? Why is this different than what like Facebook uses?
Yeah, so we're specifically focusing on drone and sensor data because that's where we see like the biggest problem. There's all of these new drone platforms and unmanned systems that are being fielded down to the battalion and company level and even platoon level now, I think with like a Group 1 small unmanned aerial system. So they've got all these new sensors and all these new data feeds, radio frequency, full motion video, ELINT, all this stuff. So why not have that in an easy to use application where you can just chat with the data that's being collected? And what I've learned in the military, and I'm sure that a lot of other people have, especially in the intelligence community, is that one source of data is not as good as multiple sources of data. So when you're trying to do confirmation of something that's occurred in at least in the military, the way we were trained was we were looking for multiple sources of data, and to get those working in like a database or on an application, you have to really integrate it into a common format, and it's got to speak a certain language, and then you can be able to communicate that value out to others. So that's a lot of what we do is we provide that common standard. Actually came from philosophy, which is why it hasn't really been integrated yet. And also, again, the problem was largely in the military, but we're finding it's now more useful in the commercial space as well.
What do you mean by it came from philosophy? Like the school of thought philosophy, or?
Yeah, no, the school of thought philosophy. Like, think about people who argue about like what a rock is. There's like lawyers and philosophers are cheap, and they spend a lot of time thinking about like what that rock is and who had the rock and all that, so on and so forth. So this is what they call a top-level ontology. It is a way to define abstract and concrete things in the world. It's an ISO standard. It's been around for 40 years, but it's been largely used in academia, occasionally in some business projects that people have heard of, probably Siri, like the first version of Siri. They used the top-level ontology to try to integrate the different statements that you would make. So it's a way to integrate abstract concepts. And we found it's actually very useful when communicating with artificial intelligence agents and humans, because it's kind of a common way that those AI agents and humans can communicate about the world.
So it sounds like we have this library full of information, whether it's drone feeds or movement data or whatever it is. And this is an AI librarian that you can just go talk to, like, hey, I'm about to go do something, or in Kunar province, I need to understand what's going on in the area and the provinces around it. Can you get me this information from these dates? And they can go just pull that for you. Yeah,
provided there is data. And that's the key difference is, most of the time when you're dealing with AI, it's going to produce something. And in this case, the agent produces a query to a database. And if there's no data, then sorry, there's no data on the thing you asked for. So sometimes you don't know what question to ask, but that also relates to what you find important.
All right. And what data sets are you guys having this AI bot go look at? Like what's actually out there?
So there's for some customers, it's been documents. For other customers, we have a SOCOM's customer, an unmanned underwater vehicle that's going around underwater, and the telemetry associated with that. Also, the model feeds off of any of the video underwater. We worked with another company on small unmanned aerial system feeds, sonar feeds, other radar, like synthetic aperture radar feeds, RF survey data, like specifically on GPS jammers. So yeah, you can ask it a lot of different things, and we're integrating new data sources every day. So it really just depends on the problem, and we get those problems from our customers, and a lot of that is housed in their data. And that's the odd thing about what we're doing. It's not all the world's data. We don't think that we have the magic database to solve all the world's problems, nor do we think it exists, because value is always in the eye of the beholder. So if we can enable people to build these databases themselves and equip their agents to answer their own questions, then we'll think that we've been successful at solving the problem.
Okay. And how does that work with the government as far as getting members of the intelligence community to grant access to your system as a civilian company?
Yeah, so you have to go deploy to their infrastructure. And you have to know how to do it. You have to, we came from, the IC, we came from different parts of the government. We are architected for the bureaucracy, if you will. So there's a lot of cybersecurity requirements. Everything's got to be on port 443. Have a reverse proxy enter. There's all this configuration stuff that you have to do, and then you have to get authority to operate an ATO. And fortunately, nowadays, there's some companies that are making that process go a little bit quicker. And we work with some of those companies like Second Front, I think is one of them. And yeah, there's a couple other solutions out there.
Okay. So how does it work with, you're in the government, you identify this problem, you said you stood up a program office inside the government to actually address this?
Yeah. So my co-founder Tim's told me, like, Jake, you've had like 3 startups. I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, I was in government, but he said, yeah, the first time we came up with this idea, you went and got us money. And so it was a project and it was an idea. We used some internal resources to solve it. And then we pitched Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security on it. They gave us about $1.8 million to buy some software and then, let some services contracts and try to figure this out. And then we worked on a particular problem related to money laundering and counter narcotics and sanctions evasion. And we got data from U.S. Treasury Bank Secrecy Act, got data from it was container shipment data of the world from Lloyd's, and then we got chain analysis cryptocurrency data, integrated about like a 40 terabyte knowledge graph. But this was pre-AI, so we had to teach somebody how to use the query language, and we were successful at teaching one person, and that one person was really good though. He was like targets like that. And
talk about being single threaded though.
Yeah. It was that kind of stunk, but we integrated that data, and then that turned into a $10 million program office. We had a budget, 5 years. It was supposed to grow every year, and as a government civilian, that's nirvana. That's what you're supposed to go to, and you just keep building your little rice bowl every year. And we were like, yeah, no, but there's this technology problem that's still not fixed. And so we decided, we were like, oh, kind of had one foot out the door. And then Russia invaded the Ukraine, and we thought, okay, it'd be, absolutely going to use this database that we created. And at the time, they weren't into it. They didn't want the spotlight. Like I said, there was only one guy who knew the query language. So it was like, okay, well, why don't we leave and try to create something out of this technology that we built? So that's when we wrote the next version, and then now we're kind of on version 2 or version 3, depending on how you count. Of our software.
Okay. Well, it sounds like too that a lot of the information that you're getting value from is actually open source. It just needs to be aggregated and analyzed.
Well, it depends. With some of the customers, it's not. It's like it's their specific data, and we're deploying to their hardware. Mm-hmm. With some customers, it is public data. Like we've got one deployment where it's all of the systems award management and federal procurement data set, acquisition related data that they're incorporating with their own data. And then, then they're asking questions and trying to find out information on, threats to their acquisition.
Okay. And you mentioned Russia invading Ukraine.
Yeah.
What about that made what you were working on that much more relevant?
Well, so we had structured that data set around...
And you're still in the government at this point, correct?
Yeah. That's how I'm still in the government. So we had structured that data set around sanctioned entities. So when Russia invaded the Ukraine, there was a big call for trying to identify sanctioned entities and additional sanctions that could be rolled out from those existing entities, like new assets, yachts and real estate and so on and so forth. So we actually had the ability to find that really rapidly in the data set. But, there wasn't a lot of interest in doing that, at least from the office we were working at. A lot of other people did that in government. But because they didn't really want to use the data set, technology we created, we decided, hey, let's go and do something else.
Why do you think there is hesitation? When you got believed in this enough to leave your government careers, go out and start a company.
Yeah.
What do you think your peers, colleagues, other government employees were missing in what you were doing and why it was valuable?
A couple things. I think that at the time, nobody wanted the spotlight. They didn't want the pressure to have to produce. We were working largely in research and development and applied R&D. So there is a bit of freedom that comes with that. And then secondarily, there was a lot of people didn't understand the technology. I could say all day that we got 40 terabytes worth of data in it, but not many people were querying it on a regular basis. And that actually was a point of insight to us. Like with a lot of these large language models that were coming out, and we were trying to use BERT at the time, which is one of those earlier large language models that didn't have the breadth of training that things like Llama 3 or ChatGPT have. But we were trying to use them to get more people to be able to query this data set because we saw its value. If you build this interconnected data set between 4 or 5 different really useful, valuable data sets that's really kind of purpose built to identify people evading sanctions or people doing money laundering. We thought that was valuable in and of itself, but we learned, I think, a really valuable lesson is not really many people could use it. So because not many people could use it, they couldn't really identify its value. So, that was a problem. So that's part of why, like when, Meta open sourced, Llama, we immediately put it on as a query layer. And, now when you're typing in a prompt in our software, it's generating a graph traversal, a database query to then go and get that data. So you didn't have to, learn that query language because, like I said, I got one guy to learn it. So
nice. So what's it been like being on the outside, getting the government to now come use you as a provider of the same service that they essentially passed on while you were in government? How do you go around, like turn it back around with, hey guys, let me sell you on this cool thing that I actually worked on while I was there, but you didn't want at the time?
Yeah, it's very interesting because it's all it's still bureaucracy. I'm now dealing with, in some ways, more layers of bureaucracy, and it's not really clear how to communicate our value in many ways. Because it's a very disconnected acquisition system. People let out a broad area announcement for a generalized capability and how they may view the world, and that as a technology provider, it's usually really broad. So we're a software company. We don't ship with data. We're not a services company. So we find that in order to meet a capability that the government is asking for, we have to team up with partners. We have a lot of good partners that we work with, and they provide the services and or the data. And then we're teaming up with them, trying to go after work for the government. But it's largely a paper drill. There's not as much opportunity to just get in front of somebody and just show them, hey, this is what we can do. Sometimes there is, and I can hop on, a Zoom call and like demo our capability to people. But that's not as often as, going through all of the announcements that are out there and then, trying to find one that maybe meets us and sending in a 5-page paper. So, the system that we have is, it could be optimized.
Yeah. So how do you guys keep the doors open while you're working through that problem set? Because getting money out of the government, if you're not one of the large prime defense contractors with a million lobbyists, is like pulling teeth, except it's your own teeth and it's excruciatingly painful the entire time.
Yes, 100%. So we're fortunate. We've got a mixture of RDT&E contracts with a couple key customers, and then we've got investment. There's a lot more interest now in the government and providing solutions to the government. And that didn't really exist when we started our company. And, we're really, really fortunate to be in the time, that we're in now. If I were back in government, I would absolutely be hitting up these venture capitalists and asking them, what is the portfolio company that they have that, could solve my problem? Because this is RDT&E that somebody else is paying for. It's trying to put my government hat back on for a second. It's fantastic that, venture capital is interested in the space. The only way that they're going to maintain that interest is if government people buy products and or services from these portfolio companies. And we communicate, hey, this works or this doesn't, or this is great or this is not.
Okay. When it comes to the government contracting process, I mean, how, between the challenges of going through the paperwork and the bureaucratic process and everything you just described versus actually developing a innovative solution that can solve a problem, which is actually harder?
I would say it's typically been the bureaucracy and people problems. Mm-hmm. You really talk to the engineers and I think they would agree, because in the federal space, your access to the customer is very limited. Access to the actual person using the technology, they're like four layers down, and they're not the buyer. The person who buys the technology is not the person who uses the technology. That's very different from other markets. That getting access to the person who's actually on there, like using your stuff every day, is really, really key. But it's typically not immediate, and it happens after the sale. So you have somebody else trying to take their requirements and determine what right looks like, and say, yeah, I think that's good. Let's buy that. And then you field it, and then you get there, and then the user maybe wants something else, and you have to adjust.
Why do they break it up that way? Why can't, like, the division commander for 10th Mountain Division say, I want this great piece of software in my division headquarters, let me go buy it? Like, why can't the operators of the technology, the equipment, actually be entrusted to go purchase it for themselves?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's related back to previous, like, malfeasance, within the government. A lot of these rules exist because somebody did something wrong. Like, it's always the age old adage. Like, I think you were in the military too. As soon as someone does something wrong, there is mass punishment, and then there is a new rule, and then you can't do it that way anymore. And I think that happened over and over and over again throughout history. As it relates to acquisition, and then also too, like, sometimes you have these people who are going to be the operators of your software, and they have a real world mission, and they don't have time to go and interact with you. Like, especially on the like tier 1 special operations side, we'll get their attention for, like, a good 10 days post deployment, pre deployment, and they'll be like, yeah, that's the thing I want. Okay, yeah, let me talk to this guy, and then boom, they're gone. Because they're going off doing a real mission. So it just depends on the environment, and they definitely put the contracts officer and acquisition process firmly in the hands of acquisition professionals. But those acquisition professionals may not have mission experience, or only have, like, a requirements document, like, especially in the Army and the Air Force. Well, I guess all the services, really, they make it a very bureaucratic process where everybody knows what they want, but it's not in a draft requirement yet. And because it's not in a draft requirement yet, then no one can purchase it on behalf of a program office or a program manager. So even though we all know that we want it, we can't buy it.
Yeah,
definitely heard that multiple times.
No, I've sold some stuff to the government, and without getting anyone in trouble, I remember one time I showed up and I was talking to this person who was in charge of one of the program executive offices. So a member of senior executive service and all that. And we were talking about this way this technology would be deployed, and everything he was saying was just completely wrong. It was completely backwards. And I'm sitting there like, dude, that's not how it works. Like, well, you can't do A. I'm like, yeah, no, you shouldn't do A. Don't do A. That's stupid. Who's telling you to do A? Don't do A. Do B.
Yeah.
Like that's bad. Forget about the technology. You'd never do A. Yeah. It's so frustrating.
You're not the user, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting there too thinking, okay, I'm looking around this room, and I'm former, SF infantry guy, Ranger tab, all that stuff. I'm looking around. There's 2 full bird colonels in there with combat infantryman badges and Ranger tabs. I'm like, none of these guys said anything to you? I'm like, that's probably why they're full bird colonels in that room, because they don't say anything. Sad truth. But it's like, this is so divorced from reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And it continues to be that way. There's definitely a desire to change. And there's definitely a lot of industry communication about, hey, we want change to happen. And I know that there's been some streamlining to acquisition processes, and I talked to, we're really fortunate to have, as an advisor, we have a former head of acquisition for USSOCOM, Jim Smith, and we asked him about what's going on in the world. And, he was really excited with the last bill that came out with some streamlining of the acquisition processes. But, you streamline all that stuff, or say, like, this year, you pass a full year CR, but with caveats and differences. People don't necessarily know that changed. Like, just because you change the rules doesn't mean you told all the people, which is a challenge in government, because they're like, well, it's just the same way it's always been. not the case.
No, I've run into that too, where government contracting officials actually are not up to date on their own regulations that they're, I wouldn't say supposed to be following, but they're not up to date on the new OTAs that are out there, or the focus on CBERs and these other more flexible contracting vehicles, which have existed for years. Like, they're not actually new; they're just being told to use them.
Right. Or like, there's people running OTA processes that really feel like a cost plus fixed fee process. Just because they're used to this FAR-based process, they're not used to non-FAR, so they make all of the KOs agreements officers, and then just move forward like that.
Yeah. So, what type of progress in changing the culture on acquisition have you seen in the government since you've been working in this space?
It's really just been more of senior acquisition professionals saying they want the change. And actually somebody who's out there saying he wants to change and then following up with action would be like Justin Finelli, the CTO of the Navy. He's all over LinkedIn. He's talking about it. He's putting out new guidance. He's communicating with industry, which is fantastic. But then you have others, that are in charge of entire services or PEOs saying they want stuff, but not necessarily following it up with action. But at least now there is a communication of a desire to change, which is different than before. So, hey, that's great.
Yeah, I'll take Pete Hegseth. For all the other things that you could say about his tenure as Secretary of Defense, it's been quite entertaining, to put it mildly. But he actually has put out a lot of encouraging guidance around more flexible acquisition pathways. And I forget her name. Put out, they're trying to change the ATO process and get away from that process.
And that'll really change a lot of how companies like mine do business with the government, because ATO process is so bureaucratic.
Yeah. Let's explain to you. Most people have never heard of this. Well, what is the ATO process and why does it exist?
Okay, so it's an authority to operate is what the acronym stands for. And it exists because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of cleared and unclassified networks that are run by the Department of Defense and federal government. People joke all the time, like, "Wait, hey, aren't you worried? OpenAI got this $200 million contract with CDAO to put ChatGPT on NipperNet. Doesn't that affect you guys?" I'm like, no, that's like one NipperNet. There's like at least 300 more. Like, don't worry. So there's so many different networks, and the authority to put anything on those networks is somewhat local. Like, there are some centralized authorities. The Defense Information Security Agency, DISA, has some centralized authorities over some of these Nipper and SIPRNets for secret. And then Defense Intelligence Agency, they have their authorities to put stuff on top secret networks that they run on Department of Defense. So that those cybersecurity requirements are really bifurcated. There are standards that are approved by policy, but they have to be implemented locally on that network and then approved by someone who will take on the cognizant authority. And truly, where it's all gone wrong is the onus to perform in that role. It's not for a mission. The onus to perform is to reduce risk, period. It is not to promote the execution of mission. And typically, the people who are providing an ATO are not involved in any sort of relationship with the commander executing mission. So, they don't have that pressure from someone on high saying, you better figure this out.
So commanders who are responsible for owning risks for their organizations, this is one area where they have no input on what risks they're willing to assume.
No ownership, nothing.
And is the output of this that we have these wonderfully secure networks? Like, is my local NipperNet connected with an ATO process, more secure than commercial encryption?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Far behind, the technology that exists. As an example, I remember we were talking about zero trust when I was in the government over and over and over again. We talked about how to implement it, and it was a long conversation, between a lot of different offices, our IT shop included. And when we started a company, we just immediately went and got Cloudflare and just implemented Zero Trust on our application internally, and then have implemented it sequentially on any of those other deployments. And it was fairly simple. It was commodity hardware, and it is industry standard. And Cloudflare, I think, runs 20% of the internet from a Zero Trust standpoint. So they're pretty well acknowledged technology that does this thing. But while I was in, we had months of conversation about what to choose.
Okay, so you start this company, you've got this deep background and expertise in the bureaucratic process that you're about to go up against. But how does this impact young founders who have startups who have a great idea and they want to try to get it to the government? Where do they even start? And how many snags are along the way when they go, oh, we don't have what we need for this ATO certification. Oh, we're not CMMS certified. Oh, there's this. Oh, there's that. And now it takes them 3 years just to become compliant. I mean, that seems like a death knell to innovative businesses.
It absolutely is, because you could have these fantastic technologies that are coming out and people who are motivated and want to solve the problems of the government, who are running into these administrative gotchas left and right. And I'm fortunate or unfortunate that I have the scars. So I know some of the pathways to go down, but not everybody does. And if they don't, then I would definitely suggest finding people that do. There's definitely communities out there that will support you. I think a lot of VCs are learning, if they want to have impact in these communities, they need to bring those people who know along. People who are retiring, people who are separating out. They took the fork from civil service, and they're hiring those people, and they're trying to create some pathways for mentorship for these younger companies that just want to do some good.
Yeah. So my understanding was that Defense Innovation Unit was actually founded by Ash Carter specifically to tackle that problem. I think they're in the third iteration of DIU. They've got $1 billion budget which was the first time they've actually had their own money. Do you think that that's actually helped? If it's working, why isn't the rest of the government operating the way they are?
Yeah. So I've been involved in government for a long time. So sometimes I can maybe come across a little bit cynical. But I've seen this happen with government a lot, where someone has a little bit of success and they do some things right. And DIU did, they had these OTAs that it was kind of like OTA as a service. You have a company show up, you have a customer with some money show up, and you're like, hey, can I get this deal done? And they're like, yeah, we'll help you out. And that went off pretty well. So in the government, when that happens, typically they just overwhelm the organization with new requirements, because that's the easy button, and they're just going to spam it all day long. And the dumping of over $1 billion on DIU without an increase to their staff, their infrastructure, any sort of processes to scale them as an organization, I think has largely been not great.
So they've gone from a Silicon Valley partner trying to make all these small companies do business with the Department of Defense with no budget to one with $1 billion budget, and they didn't give them any additional staff. And of course, people then ask, well, why don't they spend that $1 billion on staff? It's not the way government money works. So they have $1 billion, but very limited on what they can spend it on, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And, for those who aren't familiar with government processes, the goal at the end of the year is to make the dollars go to zero. That is always your goal, because then you'll get the dollars next year. So if you give somebody more money and you don't give them the ability to have any more contracts officers, then the only way that they're going to get that money on contract is to award larger contracts. And those larger contracts are typically going to go to more mature, well-established businesses that have been doing business development for a long time, that maybe are systems integrators, people like Palantir or Anduril, who've either acquired a bunch of businesses or, been like Palantir, been in the business, 22, 23 years. So, there's a lot of reasons why if you follow these processes, you're going to end up with the same result.
Yeah. So what's the biggest barrier to reforming government contracting, even at a micro level? Because we've seen, well, if you can look at the history of DIU, there's some great books out there. But it's a great case study. and how the system rejects change. It's almost allergic to the thought that it could evolve.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest barriers is the ability to make small bets, and the authority to do so at a local level. So from a contracting authority, it's typically centralized in, contracts officers. You have OTAs, you have agreements officers, but they largely, a lot of people have kind of pushed those agreements officers over to contracts officers again. So you don't have the ability for an individual program manager, a person who's been assigned to develop capability, to just say, hey, I got 500 grand and I'm going to make, 20 bets, and I'm going to talk to this garage band, 20-year-olds and give them money. And I want to give these other people over here who have this startup. These smaller bets, that's where defense really, they can't perform, because it takes as much time and effort to award a $10 million contract as it does to award a $50,000 contract. So why award a $50,000 contract? It just makes no sense from a rules standpoint.
Yeah, that's wild. It's very different than what a lot of folks in corporate America are used to.
Yeah, right. It's a different world. And if you know that going in, you can try to position yourself. But then, unfortunately, sometimes you may get in trouble for speaking the truth. So hold back. I keep trying to tell myself, no, just maybe let it happen. Don't complain.
Well, it's frustrating too from the outside looking in, because we're watching warfare change in real time in Ukraine. Right. The way they're using drones, it's gone well beyond anything that most of us imagined. It's been remarkable innovations coming out there. We start, wargaming what's going to happen in the South China Sea if everything goes hot with China. And the gap between where we need to be and where we are just seems so big. And we just seem to be so incapable of making meaningful progress towards addressing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, small bets would help that come about. Realistically, if you're saying, hey, I'm going to trust one systems integrator with $100 million to make all of the small bets for me, you're going to end up with all of a sudden that systems integrator has a product that solves your problem, and they're going to turn around and sell it to you because they're incentivized to do that. If you have a government person who has the technical skills and abilities and has the ability to contract with multiple different entities to really solve the problem, they're going to be more successful. There's some people that want to be in government and do that, and there's some people that don't. Finding those people who really want to build capability are important. We're lucky. We found a couple, in government, in SOCOM, in the Air Force, and we keep looking for those trusted partners. And we want to help because back in 1999 when I went to DLI for Mandarin, I knew that China was going to be a big thing. They had a lot more people than us. I thought that was important. Then the whole 9/11 thing happened. And, we did GWAT, but now we're kind of all the way circled back. And there's a lot of capability, like you mentioned, the Ukraine war. Nobody thought when Russia invaded the Ukraine that all of a sudden the Ukrainians, a country without a navy, would be launching sidewinders off of a remote controlled jet ski to take out a plane. It's something they've done, and been successful at. And they've taken out multiple ships on the Russian Navy side, and they've had to learn really quickly. And part of how they've learned is by making these small bets and pushing out those resources to the lowest level to make those bets.
So as you look forward and you're trying to grow this business, what are your next opportunities to get more clients in the government? Where do you think that your technology can best support the warfighter? And with that, you have to filter it through the lens of, and how do you actually have trusted partners that can help you get to those places? Yeah,
so we found that just accepting how the defense industrial base is and how things work is really important. And partnering with systems integrators is really the path for us to really get our software in the hands of somebody who's going to use it in a capability. Because we realize like integration of data coming off of multiple drones and multiple drone feeds, it's not really like a capability that a requirement gets written for. People are writing requirements for a singular or a suite of capabilities surrounding sensors and autonomy. So if we can partner with as many of those systems integrators as possible, or partner with government, then we're going to try to get our software in the hands of people who can use it. Because there's a lot of people who they know, okay, I'm going to field this drone, I'm going to put out this software-defined radio, and I need to find GPS jammers, but I'm trying to find it with drones. I'm trying to find it with EW sensors. I've got people with like these handheld devices going and trying to find them. You need some kind of software to put that together. And typically the people who are encountering the problem are the people who are engaged with the mission owners, and that tends to be more of the systems integrators rather than the acquisition professionals. At least that's what we found.
Gotcha. Well, we're coming up on the end of our time here today, but wanted to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your company and your take on government contracting. We could talk for a lot longer on it, but I think we both go crazy. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Yeah, thanks for the time, Scott. Definitely appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for listening in today. If you liked what you heard, please follow the podcast and share with your friends, and even consider going to the support the show link in the episode description. Thank you, and I'll see you all next time.